this COP has been very, very different from many previous ones. So people are calling it historic. I can say yes, historic, but flawed in so many ways. No doubt, the very first day of the COP28, when the decision on the operationalization of loss and damage fund was achieved, that is unprecedented. It has never happened in the history of any COP where you take a major decision on the very first day of the COP itself. In fact, there is a saying that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. So for the issue of loss and damage to be seen as a standalone issue and not being part of a bargaining process and the normal trading that happens between issues, I think that was very significant. And so that also shows the kind of political momentum that was generated over the last few years. So the pressure coming from civil society and governments that actually created this kind of a situation. And also credit should go to the UAE presidency for prioritizing it. And they wanted to start on a positive note, and which did help. So from that perspective, it was quite significant. Of course, we did not get everything that we wanted. For example, the linkage to say a scale was not there. So there was no reference to how much money is actually needed. In fact, developing countries insisted for $100 billion annually by 2030. That was not included. Estimates say that we need $290 to $580 billion annually for developing countries. There was no reference to that study. So from that perspective, there is a problem because we don't want this fund to be just another fund with some $1 million. It's not going to help. Of course, we got about $790 million by now committed by developed countries to support recovery from climate disasters. But this doesn't really go far enough. As I just said, the scale is massive. And then there are also challenges related to capitalization and how we are going to be raising the initial billions of dollars to start transferring it to developing countries. At the same time, the replenishment cycle is for 4 years, which some of us think is a very long period to actually fill the fund. So yes, so we've got the fund, and now we need to make sure that it reaches a level which is commensurate to the need. So yeah, that way we have got a lot of work to do going forward.
Another major key takeaway from COP28 was the terminology on fossil fuels, which was like transitioning away from fossil fuels by 2050. How do you see it among developing versus developed world when it comes to transitioning away with this term?
So we as civil society were very clear right from the beginning when it was announced that UAE is going to be hosting COP28. Now, it being a petro state, we wanted to make sure that this becomes the key issue for COP28. And of course, momentum has been building for quite some time. For the first time, we got a mention of fossil fuels at COP26 in 2021. It wasn't enough. It was only mainly referring to coal, and the fossil fuel was mentioned in reference to subsidies. And that too, the language was very weak. So we kept campaigning, and eventually we got this language of transitioning away from fossil fuels. Of course, we wanted a language on phasing out fossil fuels, which is far more robust and specific. But the language transitioning away also gives a very clear indication that eventually we need to be moving away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy. And that's what we need. And that also builds on some of the discussions that have happened so far, or decision taken at G20, that we are going to be tripling the renewable energy by 2030 and even doubling the energy efficiency. So in a way, we are walking in the right direction. But the reason we say it's a flawed decision, because there's a language on abatement of fossil fuels. It also refers to nuclear, which we know is a risky technology. It also talks about carbon removal, which we know is unproven, and you cannot rely on that. So there are those loopholes, or we call them dangerous distractions, which can dilute the decision that was taken to transition away from fossil fuels. But where we succeeded as developing countries to have a language which says a just, orderly, and equitable transition, which is extremely important for developing countries because they are not the ones who have caused the climate crisis. And rich countries have to do more domestically, but they also have to provide resources. So we have got that language. And there's also a specific reference to coal where it talks about phasing down without any specific target. So it's a weak language. But the pressure came from developing countries such as Pakistan, India, South Africa, Indonesia, where they felt there was an undue pressure on coal while rich countries continue to expand oil and gas in their backyard to the extent that five rich countries are going to be the leaders in expanding fossil fuels to the tune of more than 50% between now and 2050. So that's why the text was balanced so that it covers all fossil fuels and the pressure must remain on rich countries to do more.